Occasionally, Fox News host Chris Wallace will bring us some kind of like heroic journalism by American standards, but it's really what in other countries would just be called journalism. And today's is perfect because it shows us how easily a talking point that spreads like wildfire can be exposed and debunked if reporters are actually willing to do it. And many are not, or at least they're not well prepared enough to do it. And the talking point in this case is that stimulus checks are going to prisoners. Republicans have, among other things, been saying Democrats and Joe Biden are sending stimulus checks to people in prison. And some senators say it, and then right-wing media says it. And then before you know it, it's being repeated by, Republican voters in diners, the likes of which we saw in clips earlier today. The truth, of course, is that prisoners got stimulus money during the first COVID stimulus package and during the second COVID stimulus package. It's how they work. It's not set up to exclude people who are otherwise income eligible just because they're in prison. Now, maybe it could be done logistically, but a court has actually said, no, you can't do it. And so radical Republican Senator Tom Cotton pulls this bullet point and Chris Wallace confronts him. Check out Tom Cotton's defense and Chris Wallace confronting Tom Cotton with his own previous words here.
Here is one of your other complaints about the COVID relief bill. Take a look, sir.
Look how crazy some of the Democratic ideas are. I mean, they had a chance on Saturday morning to stop checks from going to prisoners, from going to the Boston bomber, for instance. And on that vote, they declined. Every single Democrat wanted to continue the practice of sending checks to prisoners.
But, Senator, under two previous COVID relief bills that you supported and voted for and that President Trump signed, prisoners also got checks in those bills.
Well, Chris, that was obviously never Congress's intent. The Trump administration, IRS, and Treasury Department did not send checks to prisoners. Liberal advocacy groups sued to try to force that. A liberal judge said they had to. This month was the first time we ever had a simple up or down vote on whether those checks should go to prisoners. And the simple fact is that every Democrat voted to keep sending checks to prisoners. I don't think that's a smart idea. I suspect most Americans don't either.
So notice how Tom Cotton tries like a mini Gish Gallop there. Gish Gallop is where you throw a bunch of stuff out and it sort of all together sounds like, wow, that's a lot. But then when you start going through each claim, you realize there's nothing there. First, Tom Cotton concedes, okay, yes, stimulus checks went to prisoners during Trump's COVID stimulus number one. Checks went to prisoners during Trump's COVID stimulus number two. And now checks are going to prisoners during the third stimulus under Joe Biden. But, says Tom Cotton, during the first and second ones, it wasn't our intent. We didn't want them to go to prisoners. This time, Democrats do want the checks to go to prisoners. It was never their intention, he says, but they did it twice. And then they only are making a big deal out of it the third time when Joe Biden is president and Democrats control the Senate. But then Tom Cotton says, this is the first time we actually had an up or down vote on it and it passed. Well, that's because you guys controlled the Senate before and you didn't want an up and down vote. But more importantly, the up and down vote this time was irrelevant because it's already been decided on previously by a federal judge. The IRS Inspector General previously, after I believe it was after the second stimulus bill, might have been the first. I think it was the second. The IRS Inspector General confirmed that they did send checks to prisoners during one of the earlier stimulus packages. And because there were no restrictions on people in jail or prison getting the money. The IRS later was pressured to change their position. And the IRS said, you know what? Prisoners don't qualify for the relief checks. And if anybody got one, they should send the money back. So prisoners filed a class action lawsuit against the IRS and the Treasury Secretary. And a federal judge ruled on this in September. The court ruling said you can't withhold coronavirus relief payments if prisoners qualify from an income standpoint just because they are incarcerated. A federal judge decided. So this up and down vote now was meaningless in the end. And recall that prisoners have to buy their own hygiene products. They pay exorbitant rates just to make phone calls. That's another big scam that preys on prisoners, which we've talked about. Give them the stimulus money, guys. We're talking about stimulus money that went to hundreds of millions of people. There's a couple million prisoners that this applied to. Let's not stand in the way. But more importantly, Tom Cotton is such a hypocrite, and his defense is so, I want to say it's so obviously bogus. If it weren't for Chris Wallace saying, whoa, 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 stop the clock here, a lot of people probably would fall for Tom Cotton's explanation. And in fact, many people do, because they see Chris Wallace and they're like, that's like when Shep Smith was on Fox. He's the one guy you can't trust on Fox News. That's unfortunately the perspective of many of these right-wing Fox viewers. But the talking point falls apart so quickly, and yet it still spreads like wildfire. So nice job, mostly by Chris Wallace. This is just kind of called journalism in many other countries, but I would have liked to see him push back even more.